I'm excited. Joining us today is Altman Morgan, a career coach specializing in transitions. In her book, which I read over the weekend, This Isn't Working, nice little pun going on there, she describes her personal brand as appropriately irreverent, inspiring action, unquote. We'll be testing that today, but it should make for a lot of fun conversation. Now, speaking of her book, it's a breath of fresh air as it goes through all of the toxins, many found in many work environments, and offers strategies for overcoming them. In our conversation today, we're going to sort of talk about two areas that I know of are interest to some of you more than others. So first is career management, which I know is of interest to all of you, both here and in there in the audience later. And then the other one is how CMOs can set themselves up for long-term success. That's part one, I'm sorry. And the second one is just career transitions, when to consider one and how to make the leap. So you're a CMO now and tomorrow you want to be something else. How does that happen? So two topics, one podcast, one interview. One is career management and the other is career transition. A lot to cover with that. Hello, Altman. How are you and where are you this fine day?
Hi, Drew. I'm doing great, and I am here in Sweet Home Chicago
All right. And are you feeling appropriately irreverent?
every day, every day.
All right. Well, just in case we have a nice audience here with us, and then, of course, later in the podcast, if they want to leave early, let's convince them to stay. Can you provide three things CMOs typically get wrong when thinking about career management? Give me the topic, and then we'll go through them one by one.
I don't know if they typically get them wrong, but I want to make sure that they don't do these things.
Okay.
These seem like very smart, successful people. So maybe they're not doing them wrong, but maybe some other people who aren't on the podcast are doing this. Um, Not keeping your resume and LinkedIn profile current. I don't care how busy you are. I don't care what's going on. I don't care if you feel really safe in your job. You need to keep your resume and LinkedIn profile current if you are a white collar professional, full stop.
Okay. That's
Um,
one.
Not positioning yourself as an expert on LinkedIn. You have expertise, you have a point of view of marketing, you have success stories, you have things that could be done better. Keeping your thought leadership and demonstrating how you think on LinkedIn, it's a non negotiable for the level of professional who's on this live stream. Three, not staying in touch with former managers and colleagues, because guess what? Everything old is new again. And the best way to find a job is still getting recommended into it or getting hired by a past manager who loved you.
I love these three, and it's a great place. And I want to go through each of them. I've heard all the excuses about not keeping the resume. I'm just too busy. Uh, why is it so important to just keep that LinkedIn profile up to date?
Okay. First of all, uh, if a recruiter calls you for a dream job and wants to back up the money truck, you might want to be ready to send them your resume and not say, oh, I haven't updated it recently, or it's still a work in progress, or blah. Like, that's not coming from a position of power. You want to be able to send that baby and be very confident that it's going to present you in the way you want. Ditto for LinkedIn. I actually believe that LinkedIn is as important or more important than your resume, because there isn't a human who's going to have a conversation with you at this level and not look you up on LinkedIn first. Your LinkedIn profile has to be buttoned up.
And so, just to sort of every 3 months, every 6 months, at least annually, I mean, again, busy. It's all
When
about time management.
when something changes, but how hard is it to add an X? This is a living document. It's not static. If you just got an award, or if you just launched a new product, or if you just um, had a big success with your agency, like, just add another bullet into your current thing. Like, it's not hard. How much time will that take? 3 minutes to massage the words. Like, it's not a big time commitment.
Okay. All right. So we're going to keep our resumes and LinkedIn profiles up to date at some interval that makes sense based on the news that you're bringing. Okay. Number two, not positioning your expertise on LinkedIn. This is something that I've noticed when I talk to folks that are in transition, the two biggest regrets they have is one, that they didn't spend any time building their personal brands and their content around, and their number two is that they didn't keep up with their network, right? Which are your number two and threes of your point. But let's talk about this. I mean, all of the folks on this call are smart, strategic, data-driven leaders who drive organizational change, okay? And yet, that doesn't sound very distinctive, right? So let's
Oh,
talk about,
it's generic words.
right.
But there's some point of view that you have, some way that you approach your work, some depth of industry expertise that you bring. When LinkedIn added the features section at the top of profiles where you can embed media, to my mind, that's what made LinkedIn more important than a personal website for people at this point. Nobody's going to do that extra click to go to your website. But when you can embed media, a recent media mention, a recent PowerPoint deck, a recent video, a recent whatever your podcast you were on, like, executives are often front facing people. They have something in that featured section, and you're saying, well, nobody's going to look at that. And I'm going to tell you, you are wrong. A VP of sales that I worked with recently got her job because the CEO listened to a podcast she was on. And it was a random thing that I made her do. She'd never done one before, and she crushed it. And she got a job because of that.
Amazing. Wait, that's kind of like marketing. You're out there, you're getting exposure. Marketing works, but you have to apply it yourself. I want to go back to this notion of the personal website, because I get that question a lot. So LinkedIn essentially is the surrogate personal website, and your advice to the CMOs here is it may not be worth the time.
If you want to do it and you enjoy it and you have the money and the time, have at it. But as you well know, because you're marketing professionals, nobody's going to go to it. So if you're not driving traffic to your website, nobody's going to go to it. Well, everybody who has a conversation with you will go to LinkedIn. Yes, they will.
Okay.
I think it's a vanity metric. Like, especially if you're trying to stay in corporate, if you're looking to, if you're testing the waters to go out as a consultant, we might have a slightly different conversation. But when people are looking to make investments and going the consulting route, I steer them back from the website. That's not one of the things I think they first go to market with, because you don't know your value proposition yet. You don't know your ideal clients. You'll just have to redo the whole thing anyway.
So let's stay on this positioning theme a little bit deeper, because we talked about, you can give an example, not just of someone being on a podcast, but someone you've worked with, or that you think of, where as a marketing leader, their position was actually distinctive.
Oh, I have a good one for this. I worked with someone who was, depending on the size of the company, director, VP, CMO type level person. And we found her sweet spot. We were digging around for it. She was a marketer who actually loved working with sales. And you can probably back me up on this. There's often a lot of clashing between sales and marketing. Um, Sales thinks marketing has no firsthand experience, doesn't know what they're talking about. Marketing thinks sales are entitled babies. Like, there's there's a lot of friction in a lot of organizations between sales and marketing. But she actually loved working with salespeople, hearing what they were doing in the field, empowering them with collateral and talking points and what they needed to be successful. And I thought that was very powerful and a true differentiator.
It is a place that you can go deep on. And that's the key thing. I mean, I actually know a number of CMOs in our community that are really into that, but not all of them go deep there. So when we talk about that positioning and so forth. At the moment, I feel like we should just talk about headlines on LinkedIn, because I look at a lot of headlines on LinkedIn of CMOs, and they all say the same thing. So
Data driven marketing expert boosting profits for leading brands.
right. And I struggle with that because the response is, well, someone said, those are all the keywords that are being searched. And I struggle with it because, it's a generic statement and you're not generic people. So what's this fine line? And should we even be thinking about searchability in the headline versus differentiation?
Oh yes. Oh yes, we should. But we have about 200 characters, I think, to do it in.
Right.
So what I would do, or what I like to do with people, is to come up with, chief marketing officer, you want that in there, right? And then maybe the industries that you specialize in, or your secret sauce around it. Um, you can add some personality into it. There's enough room,
Right.
but is the most important piece of real estate on the internet is your headline. Like that, if somebody only reads that, they should more or less know who you are and what you do.
We've talked about this before on other bonus huddles, but there is a reason why you have to spell out chief marketing officer, because LinkedIn search is not very good. I'm just going to put a thing on it.
It's not.
CMO might come up as chief medical officer. So you really need to put CMO. If you haven't had the title, this comes up, but you've been the leader of marketing. Can you still put chief marketing officer?
No, you can put marketing leader, senior marketing executive. Don't lie, folks. Everything is find outable. Like,
Right.
don't lie. But there are always a nice. You're in marketing. I can't believe I'm telling you this. You can always put a nice frame around it so that it shows you in the best possible light. But if you want to be cheeky, say aspiring CMO. That would be accurate.
Right. Aspiring chief marketing officer. Right. So you show up in the search again, not
Yeah, and then you
CMO.
can put in parentheses CMO so that you hit for both. And
Right.
I agree with you, Drew. I think I just tell people computers are stupid. Like, make it easy for them.
Right. Okay. So headlines really important. Make sure that there's some element of differentiation. At some point, what your secret sauce is. Okay. I want to go now to the third point, which is not staying in touch with former managers, colleagues. One of the things that I've heard a lot of CMOs say during the interview process is that they are asking for two bosses, two peers, and two direct reports as references anyway. And they're going to do backdoor searching if you don't give them the names. So there's a logical reason to always be in the thing. But I just want to sort of add a little bit about why this is, just emphasize why it's so important. For folks in transition who are already in transition, that's like first step is go back to all these people, right?
Yeah, I get it, but it can feel a little awkward to reach out to people if you hadn't talked to them in 5 years, or
Yes.
maybe you had a very good relationship with them. And, if it has been 5 years and you've just been nose to the grindstone or had some stuff going on in your life and you couldn't keep up, don't let that make you hesitate to reach out to people. Because to date, I have not had anybody get snapped at or a bad response from somebody who they hadn't talked to in 10 years. I had to do this myself to get a client an introduction to somebody. I had to reach out to somebody I hadn't talked to in 10 years. And yeah, it's squishy. You feel like you feel a little squishy,
Remember me?
but couldn't have been nicer. And that's usually what happens. You may not get a response, but you hit them when they were busy or something. It usually has nothing to do with you. They meant to respond and then they had a fire drill, because that happens. Like don't take it personally, but you also, the best opportunities, you will likely be referred into by somebody, or you'll need them, as you said, as a reference, Drew. Like, it's very important to keep your references warm, because once again, it's a little squishy reaching out to people. Hi, remember when we worked together 8 years ago? I'm going to be interviewing for this job, and can I use you as a reference? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, the hard part and the unfortunate part is there, so much of people, because it's easy to figure out who you work for and find the connections, they're doing backdoor anyway. So it's just another reason why you have to preemptively reach out to both the, and there may be some people in your background, this came up one time, who aren't fans that you may need to touch base with and revisit. You may have had a wrong impression or you thought you were interested. I want to make one other.
wait. If you were a decent human, like if you were, there's friction in the office. Once again, not a news flash,
Right.
but if you were more or less a decent human, whatever thing you might have felt at the time does tend to heal those things. So don't assume that they remember it that way or that they even care. Mostly, especially after COVID, people are dying to connect. So I would assume that the relationship is good unless you hit the flamethrower on the way out. You know that
It's
it's really bad.
yeah, watch
Which
this
people
train
have
through.
done, raising hand.
You've done okay. I want to touch base on one point. So you talked about reaching out. They might be busy and they might. One little trick that I do, because occasionally I'll reach out to someone that I hadn't talked to in several years, is I blind copy myself on it. I hit the snooze button for exactly 1 week. So it's in my inbox and it reminds me in 1 week, I'm going to reach out to them again. And I do that twice. So just
Smart.
as a way, because think about frequency, you need 3x is a lot better than 1x. And, we're all overwhelmed with email. If you have their cell phone number, and I'm interested in your opinion, I often will text, if I have their cell phone number, there's a certain intimacy there. I will text them first because I'm like, I get 5x the response on text versus phones. What's your thought there?
I I don't have one. I'm going with your idea.
Okay.
Uh, I'm a big
Okay.
fan of LinkedIn Messenger, but
Another route.
unfortunately, a lot of people aren't, um, because that gives the people the opportunity to say, "Oh, I hadn't thought of her in a while. What's she doing?" Like they can do a little background on you. From that, the texting thing, yes, if you have their cell phone, that's relationship is at a different level. So sure, reach out and text people. Most people are good with that.
I agree. And again, I'm thinking campaign management here. It is not inappropriate to send them an email, send them a message on LinkedIn. Maybe you stagger it by a day and or text them, because at that point in time, they kind of know there's some sense of urgency and they go, okay, I got to do it. We did have one comment that, and I could name you if you're and raise your hand, but they said they're adding decent human to their LinkedIn profile. I love that. Thank you for that.
You'll hear me use that a lot because
Uh,
that is a metric for happiness in the workplace. If you more or less work with decent humans, you're going to have a better work experience.
okay. So, all right, we've covered those things pretty well, that the three in terms of, and I think there's a flip side of this, which is uh, I know that a lot of CMOs regret not taking a headhunter's call while they have a job, that they didn't help a former colleague when they had the opportunity. There's a quid, you got to make some deposits in the goodwill bank while you're going along, right? I mean, that seems obvious, but it doesn't always happen.
No, let me dogpile on that. So it's good. Think of it as research. Don't you want to know what's going on in the marketplace? Don't you want to hear who's hiring and how much? Like maybe you're grossly underpaid. Or maybe there's an opportunity you hadn't considered. And yes, creating goodwill with executive recruiters at your level, that is one good avenue for finding your next job. Or you may be in a place to refer a colleague to a recruiter, which also builds goodwill. Like you're right, it's a deposit in the karma bank, is what I call it. So
And
you should
and
do that.
so
Take interviews. You want to be in your job for 5 years, never had an interview, find yourself on the street, and you're like, oh my God, kill me now. How am I going to do this? Like, keep it current. It's a
Right.
muscle.
So just staying with the recruiters for a moment, we know that maybe 1 in 4 jobs will come that way. The rest are going to be your network. But the thing about the recruiter is if you help, if they place you in another job, you have financial value to you. 2, if you've referred somebody they were able to place, you have financial value. That ensures you will get your phone call return when you need them. And it's as simple as that. That's the formula. Help them now while you have a job. Okay. So taking interviews is a great thought. Just to do it, just to stay fresh. And
You
I
don't
love that.
make a friend. By the way, that also builds your network. Because if you find out about the job, maybe it's not for you, but maybe you refer a person. And once again, you're building goodwill and extending your network. Like, this is just a win-win.
Yeah. Take the interview. I love that idea. And there's so many good things that can come of it. You help build a relationship. You can help those people. It's a very helping notion of, again, karma. Now, uh, let's talk about nose to the grindstone syndrome. I just have to do my job. I've got so much going on. Our PE firm is breathing down our neck. We got to get the shareholder reports. I've heard a million excuses. I don't have time to X. And we've talked about the 3 things. 1, keep my LinkedIn profile up to date. 2, not practicing, and 3, not staying in touch. So can we sort of offer some relief or suggestions on the nose to the grindstone syndrome?
Sure. Your, your to-do list is never going to be done. It just isn't. If you're waiting for that time when inspiration is going to hit or time is going to be available, if you're working in that type of environment, it's not going to come. You have to carve it out. And
Right.
also, here's the little tough love part. Is there any part of this that you're doing to yourself? Are you getting a cookie for overworking and being over busy? Is there time that you could be taking? Do you get an ego hit for being needed? Take a look at that too.
Yeah, it's like the back in college days where people would brag about the number of hours they were in the library. Yeah. Is that the goal here? Uh, and it gets back to management and leadership and priorities and time management, which we talk a lot about, but it really does come down to a priority. Now, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This is a true story. A couple of times in the last 2 years, CMOs have called me and said they are in a toxic environment, often a PE firm. And it's like, part of it is the PE firm, part of it is an entrepreneurial founder CEO who just changes their mind all the time, who's breathing down their neck, who doesn't know how to push back on the PE firm. The PE firm's getting into the weeds. It's just ugly. And, I'm really in this moment of torn because I know, 1, it's so much easier to get a job when they have a job. 2, you don't want to be running away from a job. You want to run to a job. But there is such a thing where
Sometimes
it's
running away
toxic.
is the right answer. True.
Yeah. So help, just talk a little bit about that. Cause, I've been, admittedly a little bit, cautious recommending, hey, just walk away.
Okay. So let me pull this apart because there's actually a couple scenarios within that.
Yes.
So if you're an existing employee and you're happily doing your job, you're more or less, you know, rocking it, having fun. And then you have VC investment, and all of a sudden you realize that the name on the door didn't change, but literally everything about your role, the organization, and you get into the state of, what is going on? This was such a great job, and now this is awful, and I'm hating my life, and I'm being told I'm an idiot, and it's awful. So it's very disorienting if you are in an organization and then something that's just like, why would you think a financial investment would affect your entire life? The metrics you're evaluated against, your team, the cadence, everything. It can and it will. So first of all, you're not crazy. If that's you, um, you can try and wait out the whitewater of the integration and see if it gets into something that's manageable, or that just might be, the knock on the door saying it's time for you to start looking. Uh, VC investment, uh, PE isn't any better. I had 3 people call me in the same week, senior executives, saying the culture has changed so much. I'm hating life. I have to find a new job. One was the president of the company. One was the COO. And they're like, they're cutting my benefits, they're cutting my salary, they're saying that it's a fair wage, and and they're out of there. So what you'll do is you'll lose your top talent. So that's one. Um, However, if you're coming in after the VC investment and the firm's a hot mess, it's just going to be your normal, and you're going to see if maybe over time things even out, and you can figure out a place to get your footing. But it's if you're in there and the culture changes, get out. It's not
Okay.
you'll never be happy again.
Right.
Wait.
And this is sort of it's funny. I have a grandfather who was in the advertising business in the 30s and 40s, and in like early 40s, his doctor said, "Walter, you got to get out of the business. It's going to kill you." And he did. And I know that a doctor once told you at one point that you needed to quit. So what are the times when like your personal health is at risk and forces you into this decision, like, I got to get out of here?
Okay, they can't pay you enough to damage your health. If you are at a point where your pressure is spiking to 165 over 135, like I was, you need to make a plan to get out of there, and sooner rather than later. That it's not worth it.
Right.
Uh,
Right. Okay.
that's a hard no.
Okay. So in your book,
Can
you
we
talk,
talk about crazy founders for a minute? Because that's actually a little bit of a different
let's
thing.
talk about, yeah. And so you have and when you talk about crazy founder, it's a little, one is the sort of, I created this product. I'm the smartest person in the room. That's one. And
That's
it's a
doable.
lot of it is insecure. They're just really insecure. Their first time. And so they're second guessing themselves and everybody else around them all the time.
Okay, that's one variation for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Another variation is they're just nuts. Like they make a decision, they change their mind. They spend the time keeping their team in chaos because
Right.
they enjoy the way it makes them feel, watching people like being the puppeteer and watching everybody and pulling their strings. A client of mine was just working for one, and independent people within that organization were calling me saying the CEO's nuts. He keeps changing his mind. I got it. So he's just nuts. So what do? Well, you can leave, or you can hope that he's in at that point where they push out the visionary founder into like some front-facing thought leader role, and they bring in a experienced management team to run the company to stabilize and set it up for scale once the personality's out. So that's one thing you can do. And then there's the revolving door thing, by the way, because sometimes, we've had management reorganization, and management reorganization, every quarter or every half a year or every year, we've all been in those organizations. So if you, at that point, you're hating your life, you're hating your boss, you might want to wait it out because there's going to be another reorg.
Right. If they're happening all the time, you can
Roll the
sort of make,
dice and see if it's going to be better.
right. Because it's true that particularly when VC or PE money is involved, after the CEO has replaced the CRO with CFO and the CMO, then next thing you know, it's going to be the CEO's turn. Um, uh,
Yeah.
and
The question to ask yourself is, do you like what the company is doing? Do you love your team? Like, if whoever is the roadblock to your happiness weren't there, would you want to work there? That's you pull that person out because they may
right.
be short-lived. And would you still want to be there? If you still want to be there, it might be worth waiting it out. If you're like, yeah, they can't pay me enough, get out.
Okay. Um, It's easier said than done. Some people will say, well, financially, I need this. I got 2 kids in college. I've got all sorts of overhead. This would be a really bad time for me to sit on the bench for a year. And some searches take that long. So finding the courage, and we're almost ready to talk about transitions and transitioning out of, say, a marketing role into something else. But I just want to make sure that, is there anything else we should be thinking about or covering for the folks? I mean, there's a group of CMOs, many of whom are in roles right now, to help them manage their careers in a way that gives them sort of good health and better, karma, and just and also sort of try to stay one step ahead of the law, if you will.
If you know that it's not your forever job, like you're starting the process, it's more of your runway job until you find the next thing, and you're going to carve out the requisite amount of time to make this happen. They might get your B game for a while, because you know what? You're not going to be there by your next performance review. Most of the people on this call are probably chronic overachievers and they just wanted to throw fruit at me. But the right answer can be they just get your B game. You do a good enough job to not have somebody breathing down your face, but you don't overgive anymore. And then you put a line in the sand where you tell yourself, I'm out of here, a year from now or after bonus is paid or whatever your thing is.
I don't know any CMOs who actually think about forever jobs.
Oh, good.
I
We can have a
I think
conversation
that's a
about that.
fair assessment at this time. It feels like if you like the place and you get to year 3 or 4, you're doing really well these days. But I think the points that we've been talking about so far is that there is no such thing as your forever job unless you open up your own company where you're your own boss necessarily, or there are the rare times where the CEO and the CMO are so bonded that you're connected with that CEO until they leave. I'm thinking Kathy Buttonbell was the CMO at Emerson for 21 years. CEO left after 21 years. So did the CMO. And but that's plenty. I think a lot of folks here, if they liked where they were, would be thrilled to get to 10 years in a role. And then honestly, there are a lot of folks who see themselves as builders. They like to take a problem. It's a hot mess. I come in, I fix it up. I get the demand gen engine. I help them build a brand. They're off into by year 3 or 4. They're thinking, well, where can I do this next?
Okay.
And that's this. So, but then that's a good.
And you know yourself and you look for those opportunities, but you have no excuse for not keeping your resume up, not keeping your LinkedIn profile up, not creating thought leadership, because you know you're going to be out of there in 3 years.
Right. Okay. And okay, so we're doing all of those things naturally. So, all right, let's now sort of shift gears a little bit. Then there's one that may help the transition a bit, which is ageism. And this is a group of marketing leaders, many of whom are over 50, some of whom are over 60. It starts to get to the point where they're categorically being turned down for the second round because there's somebody in their 40s who will do it. And I know it's stupid, but
No,
what? Okay,
that's not
no,
what
it doesn't happen, or no,
that's not
what?
what's happening.
Okay.
80,
That,
90% of the time, that's not what's happening. The question
okay.
you really need to ask yourself is it an age issue or a wage issue?
Age or wage?
Like,
Okay.
can they get somebody who could adequately do the job for 50 or 100K less? Guess what? That is a money decision. It is not an age decision.
Right. And so is there any way, so you're looking
Oh,
at 3 or
here's the other thing. Can
yes,
this needs to go with it as well.
sure.
The other thing is, if we're on the experienced side of the spectrum, which is how I like to say it, because I am,
Mhm.
we are walking into an organization where the CEO might be 35. If you're 50 or 55 and your CEO is 35 and you're going in with an attitude like you're going to be grandfathered in and not have to prove yourself, or you have a problem with their decision making, guess what? That's your crappy attitude. It has nothing to do with age.
I just want them to have the opportunity to get the job that feels like a good fit for them. And I agree that it is a lot of times they're looking at a younger person because they assume they can pay them less, and they look at the more experienced person and assume they're going to have to pay them more. It's the employers making that assumption, not necessarily the person applying for the job. So there's still that, if you may age equals wage, I'm going to call that ageism. If experience equals, oh, you're going to cost more, then they're just, and that's happening and that's real. And so what,
So how do you network in? The trick is to be able to get the conversation so that you can make your case. But a lot of times marketers are the last to do the unique value proposition for themselves to the organization.
um, and we can talk about that because we had a good laugh over the fact that you're not necessarily wanting to work with a lot of CMOs and for it because you've had experience with them and they don't always get to their unique value proposition. They kind of skip the strategy stage, and we see that in transition, and go right to the the hey, pitch me for this job thing. So talk a little bit more about what when you say unique value proposition and they're not doing it. I know we covered that before, but is there anything else that they don't do, or that specifically is the hard work that it takes to really sort of define one's personal brand?
Um, I think it's helpful to productize yourself because we see us and we're like, I know what I do. I go in there, I work my magic, and the company makes money. But if you could productize yourself and get some distance from it, how how would you talk about it? If if you put it into exactly the value that you would provide to the organization, and you can get that across, it's the what's in it for them, right? So if you can get that in front of them, either via the executive recruiter or through internal HR, or in your LinkedIn profile, in your cover letter, like get that messaging across, that can get you over the hump and get the conversation. And then you can see if the fit is right and if the money's right. Like that gets you past the ageism thing as well. Because if you bring a unique point of view or a very specialized skill set or deep industry expertise, you might get the conversation.
And then it's at least you're in
And
control.
then game's on. Then,
Right.
all the other things come into play, but you got the conversation.
Okay. Let's talk about you've been a CMO 20 years, you've sort of or 15, a marketing leader, and you're just thinking, is this it? Am I going to just keep going through this thing? And so uh you write, see possibility. What if it's not too late? What would you try to learn? What if you have everything you need to apply for that job or start the business? I'm here to assure you old dogs can learn new tricks and new technology. Let's talk about that, and let's inspire folks that may want to think about transitioning out of their current roles.
Yeah, there's a couple things, that jump immediately to mind. Um, as you well know better than I do, the chief marketing officer role is kind of in a state of flux at this point. You know, I'm seeing that people are reporting up through chief revenue officers. And then, the CMO title doesn't really exist. You get a VP or senior director something title above reporting up through the CRO. So, is there some additional skills from earlier in your career, or ways that you could extend yourself? Could you be the strategy and marketing officer? Could you be Did you have a sales background previously? Do you want to go to a smaller company and do sales and marketing? Are you actually a whiz with numbers and you could do a CRO role or a chief growth officer role? Um, there's all these other chief titles that include a large component of marketing in them. If your skills and interests translate to that, you might want to explore it. LinkedIn keeps saying the chief growth officer and chief revenue officer are the big hires for 2024. Awesome.
Interesting. In CMO huddles, we call it CMO plus, and we talk about what is your plus. And part of this is the positioning of helping them be perceived as as a business leader, not just the marketing person, which I hate that term. But so, and we do have folks in our community that are head of marketing and sales, or head of marketing and customer experience, or head of
Yeah.
marketing and pipeline, whatever that is. Finding that plus is always a good thing, because then you're talking business.
Then they can't just say you're a cost.
Right.
You're tracking directly to revenue, which is often marketing's problem with perceived value.
Yeah, I personally, and it's fun, I've heard some CEOs talk about this too, that having a CMO, head of marketing, report to CRO is the death of marketing. Because then you are just all they're going to look at is short-term leads.
I've heard the same thing through sales. Like, sales doesn't respect marketing, so reporting up through sales is like a graveyard shift.
There you go. Well, all right. So let's talk. All right. So one strategy, as you're talking about, is finding your plus and why you have a job, getting to it. But let's talk about the folks who are in between opportunities right now, and they want to try to pivot to some other role and make the case. What does that involve? I mean, is it the same process of just finding your plus from your past experience?
Can you rephrase the question? I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for.
So look, if I have a current role and I have the opportunity to help the company by adding my plus, life's good, because now I've done it. I'm the head of sales and marketing. I'm the head of sales.
You may have to pitch it. You're going to have to actively pitch it. They're not looking for you and saying, oh, they have some extra value to bring. Maybe we should pay them for it. No, you're going to have to campaign hard and get dollars released for this.
Right. Okay. So a specific example of the question I was trying to ask very poorly was, from the audience, how do you transition to a chief growth officer if you've been a multi-time CMO and are currently doing fractional CMO work right now? That's the question that I was asking, essentially.
I would look up, there's very good job descriptions, if you Google is your friend on this, for chief growth officer, and then look at the skills that you don't have. Maybe you don't have enough operations or enough experience with, the customer journey from the customer experience side. Like, figure out where the skill gaps are and start plugging them in. Conversely, you may be able to go to a smaller company for a higher, more diverse role and build those out. They'll hire you for your deep marketing expertise if you're a go-to-market specialist and there's something that's, in pre-launch, that's a good time to parachute in and claim these extra things and build them out. So that's maybe one way to approach it.
Yes. So, and then what about, for example, if you don't have a specific thing, taking a course and getting certified by one of, does that help in this kind of thing?
We're talking at a very senior level for the people who'll be seeing this. So I'm not for a more junior person, I think that can be helpful. Caveat being, if there's some, Ivy League executive certification, 6-month something that could fill a gap, that might be valuable. Also, for the network boost that it would be to be with that level of professional, always a good thing. I hesitate to ask people to go and invest in certifications thinking they're going to get a payback. The time to do that is if you're seeing roles and you're missing something consistently across multiple opportunities, then go in and plug the gap because you know you'll get an ROI for that.
Okay, that's helpful. And so one of the reasons that like someone will hang on to a role is that it feels, or go back, keep looking for a full-time role, is that somehow or other feels more secure. And you quote, I'm going to quote you from the book. I laugh hysterically when anyone talks about job security. There really is no such thing as job security, but sometimes people get lucky.
Yeah,
So
sometimes people get lucky. I have a friend who I went to college with who spent their entire career at IBM, 35 years. And you're a unicorn. It doesn't happen.
right,
It really doesn't happen to
right.
marketing professionals.
So part of this thought is there's, the risk is always there, almost no matter what path you pursue.
Unfortunately, sad truth. So
Right.
what do you
So
want to so if we were coaching right now, I say, okay, so what do you want to how do you want to spend your time? What problem do you want to be solving? Let's assume that job security isn't. So we take that off the table. What do you want to be doing? What do you want to
yeah, what brings you joy? Where you're the most passionate. You talk about this in one way of knowing, and I wonder if this is I'm pulling two things together, but you talk about flow state, and that happens to me when I'm writing and I'm late for meetings all the time because I'll be writing, and that's something that does make me very happy, and I love doing it. How do you sort of get at this sort of what makes me happy and is it about the flow state and recognizing that,
It
or is
can
it
be.
broader?
Oh, yeah. And then prioritizing it, and then jealously guarding your calendar and blocking out times to do whatever gets you excited. Some people love diving into the numbers and getting them to talk to them. I call them numbers whisperers. They love that. Some people like the strategy and planning. I could literally talk about strategy all day. Strategy gets me so jazzed. So find time to do the strategy, and stop answering it, turn off your notifications on your phone and stop answering things. The email will be there in 3 hours. Like, carve out times to have your own personal offsite and really dive into the thing that you love to do, or remind yourself why you love to do it and the value you can bring.
And I love that, and I love the notion of personal offsite. And I know some CMOs always block like half of Friday or something for exactly what we're talking about. uh how does that fit when you're in transition, and is it the same idea?
Well, here's the thing about transition. Job search is stressful and boring, and literally anything will insert itself ahead of that. Your car needed an oil change, but it did not need an oil change at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday when you should be reaching out to that recruiter. So, watch for that sort of stuff. So, yes,
Right.
it applies doubly when you're in job search.
Right. And that is really thinking about, this is, you're in transition. It's saying, I have a 9 to 5 job. My job is to find my next opportunity. Nope. Oh, nope.
I wholeheartedly disagree with that.
Great.
Um, with no disrespect intended. Let me walk you through my madness. Um, when you roll out of a job, there is a lot to do. You have to get your resume up to date, LinkedIn profile up to date, your messaging points that you're thinking why you're leaving, what you're looking for. You need to reach out to your network. You need to go through the backlisting of jobs that are posted. So let's say that takes, 3-4 weeks. Cool. After that, incrementally, there is not as much to do. So if you
Mhm.
say there, I'm going to sit in my chair and I'm going to do for 8 hours a day, you are not very productive. Your time would be way better spent doing a couple timed blocks of like 2 sessions of 45 minutes or 3 sessions of 45 minutes. If you're an overachiever, if you constrain your time, you will actually get a lot more done and be a lot more productive. and give yourself a treat at the end. We're all toddlers. Like, what will all do anything for a cookie? So whatever your cookie thing is, you get to go to yoga class, you have to meet a girlfriend for lunch, or whatever your thing is. Block your time, give yourself treats. You will have a better, faster, more successful job search, and then go have some fun, or get stuff off your to-do list, or paint the garage, or do all the stuff that you couldn't do when you were running around with your hair on fire.
Or take a course that's something that you really enjoy. I love it. I love it. And it makes total sense. Okay. All right. We're running out of time. So let's just go to final question. Let's wrap up with 2 do's and 1 don't for CMOs considering a transition.
Oh my goodness. 2 do's and 1 don't. Here we go. Do number 1, do consider your current life situation when you're thinking about next steps. You are a person and a professional. So if you have, kids at home, an elder care issue or a health diagnosis or something, because we have stuff going on in our life, think about what is your right next step given everything else that's going on in your life. Do number 2, dream big. I have found that people who can tell me what they really want, I can help them map a path to achieve it. Almost always. The one don't get too comfortable and complacent. As we talked about, and personally, the marketing profession is in transition and you need to be able to adapt. So flex.
Awesome. Great do's and don'ts. Thank you, Catherine. Where can people find you and what would they hire you for?
I'm extremely findable. Catherine Altman Morgan on all platforms. My company is point A to point B transitions. I'm super active on LinkedIn. What would they hire me for? I do resume development. I do interview question coaching. I do job search strategy and accountability. Um, this used to be a tough sell when I started my business 14 years ago, but people now seem to understand that having someone in your corner to keep you on track and doing the right activities that are more likely to be successful can be a good investment.
I love it. Yes. I mean, it is in theory, well, if people do the work and you can help them get where they want to go in a more efficient way, then they can do it on themselves. All right. That wraps up this conversation. Thank you all who are here for joining it. Thank you, Catherine. And that's it for this moment. If you're a B2B CMO, can share, care, and dare with the best of them, do yourself a favor and check out cmohuddles.com. I'm Drew Neiser. Peace out.